Welcome to HSLDA's Facebook Live. Thanks for joining us today. So, our conversation for today is about heritage and homeschooling and how to instill positive identity and empathy in our children. Please feel free to leave comments in the chat and let us know where you're watching from today. My name is Anita Gibson, and I am an HSLDA High School Consultant, author, and educational strategist. I'm excited about our conversation today with the amazing Amber O'Neal Johnston from from Heritage Mom. She has a great perspective on this topic, and this will be an important conversation for parents with kids of any age. So feel free to share this with others who you think might benefit from our conversation. Amber, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Looking forward to our talk.
Yes. So please share a little bit about you and your family to get us started.
Okay, my husband Scott and I live outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and we have four children. They are 5, 7, 9, and 11. So the two littles are boys and the two olders are girls. And we're originally from the Midwest, but Scott and I met here at the Art Museum. It's a fun story.
Ah,
And so our children are from here and have been raised here, and we have been homeschooling from the beginning. Prior to homeschooling, I was a stay-at-home mom, and all along, I've always had some type of like small business venture, entrepreneurship endeavor on the side. So that's kind of a little bit about me, and I'm just very happy to be here with you today.
awesome. So, what are the joys you have found in homeschooling?
Some of the joys, wow, there's so many. I feel like the biggest thing that I enjoy most about homeschooling is the blurry line of demarcation between
Okay.
school and life. So our home life really is the same as our school life, so much so that sometimes I struggle when people ask me things like, what time does your school day end? Or how many days a year do you homeschool? And I know what they mean, and I don't want to give flippant answers, but I almost feel
Right.
like school ends when we're about to start dinner, and then we go to bedtime, and we school almost every day. I don't know, some days, every day, lots of days, not as many days. And so I really enjoy the idea of my children's education being part of our lifestyle as
Yes.
opposed to something that has like a finite stop and start. I feel like it brings an amount of leisure and flexibility to our days, weeks, and years that I've really come to embrace.
Yeah.
And I feel like it allows us to kind of build our own family culture around learning and living. And even small things like when grandma comes to town, we have the opportunity to pull back a little and go deep in those loving relationships that we wouldn't necessarily be able to otherwise do.
That's awesome. So, what attracted you to homeschooling using Charlotte Mason's philosophies?
Oh, wow. Well, Mason espoused a relational education, and it's like a living education that was filled with books and experiences, nature, and ideas. An experience where children are viewed as persons, and the educator, that being the mom or whoever, the teacher, the educator, the father, being someone who's cooperating with God in the education of the children. And the thought that there was no separation really between the sacred and the secular, because
Hmm.
it all is flowing down from him, that is what really just pulled me in. And then there's just so much beauty. When I would read about it, I had a babe in arms. I was nursing a baby, and my oldest was in preschool. And I would just be reading these things late at night, some of Charlotte Mason's writings, and I just couldn't escape the thought of how beautiful that education sounded. It sounded like something I would have loved growing up, and I really
Yeah.
wanted to give that to my children.
That is so amazing. I actually was drawn to Charlotte Mason as well. And my husband and I homeschooled for like over 20 years. And you're right. It's like it's like homeschooling has become life, and life, there's a beauty to life that when you kind of enter into some of her philosophies, you get a chance to sit in and really enjoy with your children. I love that.
Definitely.
So so were there challenges in using Charlotte Mason's principles that you found you needed to adapt for your kids?
Yes. So there were challenges. In the very beginning, I would say I didn't recognize many challenges. I felt like everything was going really, really well. And to be honest, I was impressed that my children were learning and absorbing so many beautiful pieces of literary work and music and art and poetry. And I felt good about what we were doing. A lot of the choices I made in terms of what I was sharing with my children at that time were things that I saw all the other moms who were doing Charlotte Mason. These were the things that they were doing. I was learning online and through books. And even now, when I look back at it, there was nothing wrong with it, but there started to be issues in my family with
Mm.
it. And so my oldest daughter, I could go on and on about all the problems she started exhibiting, but just to give an overview, she started really showing and saying things to show that she was very uncomfortable in her skin. So she would make comments, negative comments about having brown skin, about curly hair. She would ask me, why am I the only one? Meaning, she's meaning the other homeschooling groups and families that we were around. Why am I the only one with a brown mom?
Wow.
And I'm thinking, because you're brown, we're black. I don't know.
Right.
And I'm realizing this little girl, she just really had no clue.
Yeah.
And she would count black people wherever we went. And she would say, Mommy, there's two here. I'm not the only one. And before we would go somewhere, she would ask me, are there going to be other brown people there? So it became this real fixation on race. But for her, she really didn't have an understanding of ethnicity or background or culture. It was literally just the visuals for her. I even remember her trying out a ballet class one day and coming and telling me how much she liked it. She said, the teacher is brown, just like us. And the teacher
Wow.
was actually East Indian. But to my daughter, she looked at her and saw a mirror. She saw someone that she felt was the same as us. So
Wow.
I was really concerned about this because my husband and I had gone out of our way to create what we felt was the right thing at the time, like a colorblind childhood. So we
Okay.
had refrained from talking about race really, and we really focused on everybody being made in the image of God, and with all of us being equal and the same. We never talked about differences or favoritism.
Hmm.
So we felt that by not bringing up these conversations and not focusing on race and color and all these things, that she would grow to just see people as people. But despite that, it wasn't happening that way.
Wow.
And so eventually, I thought things would get better, but they continued to get worse. And we ended up with a situation where I had her on a field trip one day, and we were in the bathroom waiting for our turn and to use the restroom. There was a long line. And while we were waiting, she watched a lot of people exit the stalls, a lot of women exit the stalls and go and wash their hands and then dry them under the automatic dryer and walk out the door. So when it was our turn, we went to the bathroom, washed our hands, and she went to use the automatic dryer. And no matter where she put her hands, it wouldn't come on. I imagine, her little hands just weren't triggering the sensor. And she turned to me and she goes, well, I guess the dryers only work for white people. And I was like,
Wow.
oh my goodness. I'm like, okay, let's leave the bathroom. And when we got in the car and I asked her, I said, why would you say that? I'm really curious. What would make you say that? And she said, well, they know everything and they know how everything works. So I
Wow.
guess they know how the dryers work. And I said, well, what makes you think that? Why do you think they are the only ones who know everything? And she said, because you said we study important people in school and we only study white people when in our school books and in our school time. So that was very eye-opening for me. And I realized that in my efforts to not make a big deal about race by completely ignoring who she was, who we were, who we are. I basically indirectly made her feel like we weren't important. And
Wow.
so I had to really reevaluate everything that we were doing. And at first, my first inkling was to get rid of the Charlotte Mason philosophy. I'm like, oh, this is ruining my kid. This is wrong. I can't do it. But the
Right.
more that I looked into it and I was going back to her original writings, which is what I originally was turned on to, but I had started down the path of blogs and podcasts and all these other things. I cleared all of that away and went back to the writings. And when I did that, I realized that her philosophy really was for me, but
Mhm.
that I was copying exactly what other people, their interpretations of her philosophy for their families, instead of taking her philosophy and interpreting it for my family. So that
Exactly.
was my biggest challenge. And I was, forced to make some really big changes coming out of that embarrassing and humiliating bathroom day.
Okay. Yes, children have a way of teaching us.
Do they
When we
ever?
say we're homeschooling, I don't think parents realize they're homeschooling too.
Yes, yes,
Oh,
definitely.
wow, that is awesome. So you share a lot in your books about roots and branches. What do you say, mirrors and windows?
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Okay, so basically, when I realized how much our book lists were lacking representation, and again, I look at that and I say, yes, the book lists should be more diverse, but also as a parent, I had that responsibility to cater whatever I was bringing into my home for my children. It's part of why we homeschool. So I don't just say, oh, there's something wrong with the book lists. Yes, they could be better, but I
Yes.
also needed to be educated and didn't really realize what I was missing because I didn't have it growing up. And so I feel that the concept of mirrors and windows or roots and branches, the idea being that a child really needs to be rooted in who they are and be able to have images and stories about people who are like them in many ways so that they can recognize themselves in the story, that they can see the value and contributions that people like them have
Yes.
made to mankind, to society, and where they fit in.
Yes.
And at the same time, they also need windows to the world in order to spread their branches, roots and branches or mirrors and windows in order to
Right.
see the way other people live and to be
Right.
able to understand and feel comfortable around people who live or look or think differently than they do. And a lot of times I look at it as we're called to love our neighbors as ourselves. And there's a comparison there. You're saying to love your neighbor. We're being told to love our neighbors compared to something else, the way we love ourselves. If we don't know ourselves, if a child doesn't know herself and doesn't have love for herself, that impacts her ability to love her neighbor well. And so I feel like the main goal for me was to look through our homeschool and to really touch on how I could affect our book lists and other areas in order to reflect who we are in our everyday school lives and in our children's education. And so I kind of started walking around telling people that in my house, Charlotte Mason wears an afro. And that kind of stuck, but people understand what I mean when I say that, right? That I took something and I made it something for my family that works for my family.
Awesome. So I'm just loving our conversation, and I'm noticing that there are comments in the chat, and so let's go over there and take a look real quick. I see some folks are saying where they're from. Thank you guys so much for your responses. Someone asked a question. Darren Jones, he says, "What do you mean by windows and mirrors?" That sounds interesting, but I don't think I've come across it before. I think you
Okay.
did a great job of explaining what you mean by that. We've got Michigan here with Iris and Jim, Clement, Curtis. Thanks for joining. Natalie Miner Max said, hey. Shalita said, exactly. We incorporate different styles of learning. Let's see. Christy Lee said, hello from Texas. Natalie Burton said, yes, her writings are magical. And Faith Barron said, me too. Shalita, it is our total vibe because Shalita said, we love Charlotte Mason. And
Yay! So yeah,
so,
I think I answered Darren's question, but just to clarify and make sure that people understand where I'm coming from, the concept of mirrors and windows, I did not develop it. It was popularized by a former Ohio State University professor, Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop Sims, and she talked about the idea that, basically what I described, that children need both books that offer them a glimpse of themselves that they can see themselves in, as well as books that offer a view toward other people and their cultures and their situations. And we often use the term mirrors and windows to refer to ethnicity, race, culture types of things, but it also is very relevant in the fields of children with special needs, certain special family circumstances. Anytime a child feels isolated or alone, or they feel unseen or not valued or not important, being able to see someone that identifies the same way that they identify in a book or a story can change their lives. And I saw that happen, that type of turnaround in my own family.
wow, as you're saying that, it's making me think about even families with special needs. Is, to be able to find books where special needs children are doing amazing things, or they're just having a regular, it's a story about a regular day in their lives. That's pretty powerful.
It's big. I run a book club for our local homeschool group, and we read a book where I had two instances. In one of the books, like one of the characters has dyslexia, and there was a little girl in my book club, and she raised her hand. She's like, Miss Amber, and she was just bursting. She couldn't keep it, and she just blurted out, she's like, I have dyslexia, and everyone in the
Wow.
room was like, wow, that's cool, And I thought, wow, the fact that she could come to the table, and I'm good friends with her mom and knew that that had not
Yeah.
been an easy journey for them, but that she saw in this book that this cool character was able to take on that as part of who they are and still flourish in every way. And she couldn't wait to share with the group that she shared that identity with the character. And in another circumstance, the main character's best friend had celiac disease, in which case she couldn't come into contact with any products with wheat. And the whole book was about baking and a baking contest and a bake-off and all of this. And so it talked about how the friend was able to come alongside and work on things, and they would make accommodations for her when they were all
Wow.
baking things. And it's those types of little things. So yes, when I talk about mirrors and windows, I am for my family, it really reflected in terms of our culture and background. But I have seen it play out in so many different ways. And I think it's something that's relevant to every family.
That is just so awesome. I'm almost in tears over here. Just thinking about the power that we as parents have to help our children see themselves. That is, wow, what an honor that we've been given. And it's so great to have someone like you who can give parents tools so they can understand, first of all, what's going on with my child, and then how can I help them to see themselves in this world because that makes them better.
Yes,
Wow,
absolutely,
wow.
absolutely. Because I think that needs to be addressed, because I've gotten feedback from some people that says, they say, well, aren't you calling more attention to kind of the race and background and culture thing? And if you were just kind of piping down, not making such a big deal out of it, it would make it easier for kids in the next generation to just get rid of all that thinking and move on. And to that, I say, I tried that. That was my lead in, that was my go-to. And it was a
Yes,
miserable failure.
yes,
And so
yes.
from going from colorblind to colorful, colorblind bookshelves in our home to colorful bookshelves, colorblind conversations to colorful conversations, what I've
Yes.
actually seen is that my daughter has more affection and an affinity with people who are different than her, because she feels so
Mhm.
confident now in who she is.
She
So it
is.
actually didn't limit our world, it expanded it and made it, the relationships that we have, so much more healthy. So I
Yes.
think that there's a way to go about it. We don't dwell on it in our house. We don't have,
Right.
our home library isn't separated, like a rainbow. These are these books, these are these books. They're all mixed in and
Yeah.
intermingled as our conversations are. But
Yes.
I think what you end up having is a group of children who feel really comfortable having everyday conversations and feel comfortable talking about differences, and also are really adept at recognizing similarities. So it's not
Yes.
just about the differences, but we talk a lot about family life and how that's replicated as a family being the core of society across so many cultures, about intergenerational living and loving, relationships with grandparents, food and celebrations and weddings and babies being born, and all of the things that bring a smile to people's faces the world over. Those things come out of a diverse bookshelf as well.
That's right. That is so awesome. Hey, let's check back in the chat again. We've got lots going on over there. So Natalie said she shared our conversation in 5 groups. Thank you so much for that, Natalie. And then Shalita said, yes, our world is so big. Rebecca is joining us from Iowa. Awesome. And then Faith is sharing that she thinks the power of books, quality literature, children making those text self connections. Connecting with characters can be transformative. Absolutely, it can. And I'm so glad we're talking about this because some people might not even realize the challenge, that we can have as diverse people, as brown people, as black people, when it comes to helping our children be able to see themselves. And what I love about what you're saying is that we honor all people and we're able to help them because as you are become more confident in who you are and you learn about others, you are able to be excited and thankful for the value that they bring as well. Everybody brings something to the table, and
I
that's
would
a wonderful way to think about it.
It's so true. And, as my family kind of started out on this, I'm so thankful that God gave my daughter a voice at such a young age to be able
Yeah,
to so clearly articulate what her needs were, because there's nothing that reaches the heart of a mama than a hurting child. And
my.
so I am appreciative of that. And it allowed us to really shift our family culture early on and in some big major ways, which is one of the benefits of homeschooling, that when you see something that's broken, you don't have to work through a system to get it fixed. You can fix it starting the next morning when you wake up. One of the things that we did was start incorporating long international travel, world schooling into our curriculum and into our lives. And with the idea of not just giving our children book knowledge about how people are different. And I think books can take you a really long way. So, I'm not taking that away from the books, but also
Yes.
wanting them to experience what it's like to be a guest in someone else's culture, to experience the humility that's necessary, the empathy that forms when you get to see the world through someone else's experience and eyes. So we started out with 3 months in South America. We spent most of that time in Bolivia, and we kind of just lived in a neighborhood and walked to the market and experienced life. We practiced our Spanish, of course, because that is not an English speaking area at all.
Right.
It's not a tourist area there. I always tell people there
Oh,
ain't no Starbucks, there ain't no McDonald's in La Paz, Bolivia. So spending several months there was a huge learning experience for us. But the children got to see what it's like to, one, be on the outside, and to see what kind of welcoming experience or what kind of hospitality you would like to be shown when you're an outsider. It also allowed us to see some of the dynamics at play there between their indigenous people and people who are descendant from Spaniards who colonized that area. And
okay.
so we were able to look from the outside. This is in America, a lot of things are so black and white in terms of race relations, but here we are in a
True.
place that didn't have any black or white folks, and they were still fighting. And so what I
Wow.
wanted to show the children is that, hey, this is actually not personal. What you
Yes.
may experience here in the United States, this is a kind of a sign of the fallen times and the fallen world
Yes.
we live in. And no matter where you go in the world during any period of history, including today, you will have people who are ridiculously at each other's throats. But when you're not part of that story and you're looking at it, you're able to see kind of how messed up it is. And I thought
Yeah.
that that would be good for them. And it was. We had so many conversations about those things, and it allowed them to come back to their homeland and see it for what it really is. It's not personal. I would always tell them it's
Yeah.
not personal, baby. And
Yeah.
so we took our next trip. We were in Europe when COVID hit. We were supposed to be there for 3 months, but after getting stuck a little bit, we were able to make our way back home. We didn't finish the trip out. But
Okay.
that's kind of our plan, to travel the continents and allow the children to be able to experience living through someone else's kind of viewpoint, or from someone else in someone else's culture.
Can I join your homeschool?
I know, right? I've gotten a few offers of that before.
Oh my gosh, it sounds so wonderful. So we're going to go back to the comments again because it's just blowing up over here. I am just like so blessed that people are obviously being impacted by this. Let's see, where do I begin? There are so many comments. Natalie Minor Max says, yes, when more are welcome at the table, everyone at the table benefits. And then Natalie Burton
Mhm.
said, when you're a homeschooler and you see there's a problem, you don't have to go through a whole system to get it fixed. You can begin to fix it the next morning when you wake up. So she's just confirming what you had shared. Uh, and then Natalie Minor Mack is saying, oh my goodness, we have traveled and lived overseas, and our kids have been so much more enriched as a result. They see the world as much larger than the US, and they appreciate all the cultures much more. And
Yeah.
then Misty says, I love this conversation. Thank you. Man, and wow, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get to all the comments. So there are so many here, but it's funny what Natalie was saying about the travel, because I'm an Air Force brat. So my dad was in the Air Force, and I've traveled all over the world. I was in Okinawa at 5, and I was in the Philippines at 10 through 14. And I literally believe that it made me a different person because it gave me an honor, like you said earlier, of other people's cultures in a way that helped me to understand, America is great, but these other places have their value as well. And to come in, like you said, to a community where you're not the major one, is they're not speaking English, they're speaking another language. Now you have to kind of learn how to fit where they are. Those things are so critical. I really believe that traveling for homeschool parents is like essential, like even if it's just in the summertime, but something that's just really intentional and thoughtful about connecting to other people's will make such a difference in the way your children see the world.
I agree. It's been nothing but positive for us. It's not always been easy, but it's always been positive.
Okay, and you are right about that. So we're going to go ahead, and I think we're getting ready to wrap up. Let's see. Faye said, Anita, amen, Anita and Amber. Thank you for sharing and talking about this. Woohoo, the world schooling. It makes me wish I could do this over again. Although we just had a grandbaby this past Friday. It's our first grandchild, and
Oh
so
my.
I have a feeling I'm going to be homeschooling again in about 5 years.
Oh my goodness. I remember those days. My kids are my mom's last grandkids, but those first grandbabies, oh, I remember that. She was excited. So I'm happy for you. I see,
Yes.
let's see here. I see a comment from Pam Carpenter Noah, and
Yes.
she talks about some of the other things they did to incorporate cultures, and she talks about cooking. That brings up a really good point. So books are like my main go-to. That was my entryway into expanding this whole mirrors and windows and roots and branches concept,
Mhm.
because that was the thing that my daughter had pointed out to me that she never saw herself in. And not that we didn't have any books with Black people in them, but those books were like our fun books on like the fun light reading shelf. They weren't the books we were studying during school time.
Right.
That wasn't
Okay.
the book list that I was poring over. But in addition to the books, like cooking, yes, like recipes. I love to get ethnic cookbooks, restaurants that we go to, and I always like to call ahead and find out when they're going to be like the least busy, because I've found that even the restaurant staff coming to our table and willing to engage with the children and tell them about their culture or about, their favorite things on the menu that they remembered eating when they were their age. And those things have really enriched our experiences. And we love to cook. So trying those different recipes, I think for us, it has extended into music, the
Wow.
musicians that we formally study and the people we listen to in the house, and music styles. So we do hymn
Hmm.
study as part of a Charlotte Mason education. And while the lyrics to the hymns may be the same across cultures, the way the hymns are sung is not the same.
Right.
And
Okay.
so, I've had some good fun with some of my friends, and I'll listen to them and their music, their version of the music or whatever, and I'll be like, okay, well, I'm about to put on Aretha Franklin, and she's going to show you how it sounded in my church growing up. And so the children and I have had real fun listening to all these different versions of choral music and formal hymn and down home soul music that can be a little hard to sing along with, and bluegrass and country and all the different types. But yet all of the people are singing the same words of praise and worship to the same God.
Yeah.
And I just think that that's so beautiful. So the music, the poetry, every culture has its poets, and poetry and things that they value come across in their poetry. The experiences, the pain, the joys of a culture come through in their poetry. So we've looked and examined that. Field trips where we spend our time within our own community with artisans of certain cultures. So if we're going to talk about, if we read a book and it talks about basket weaving, we'll look and try to go into the area of South Carolina where the Gullah people lived, who have been weaving those baskets for such a long time, and allow the children to be able to interact with them, because people want to share about their culture. That's what I've found.
Yes.
They're just waiting to be asked.
Yes. Yes.
And so I think a lot of those things, that's a far away field trip, but even our local field trips around town, being very intentional about showing the beauty that exists within our own culture has been a big part for me, because I was doing a healing and repairing job with my children, but
Yes.
also other cultures as well.
That is awesome. Well, we're almost done. Did you see anything else in the comments that we needed to respond to before we move on to our final question?
No, I
We're
don't think so.
good.
I see Pam said Aretha is the best. She is feeling me on this.
Awesome. Awesome. We are so happy for everyone who has joined us today. We're really hoping that you are being encouraged by the amazing Amber. She is just a blessing. And so, my final question to you is, do you have any specific encouragement for uh, moms and dads today?
I really do. I think if I was going to say one thing, it would be, don't be afraid of what you don't know. And I'm not a historian. Trust me. I'm not an expert. I'm a product of the same education that most of the people listening also experienced. Both of my parents were public school principals, and I know no more about Black history, Native history, what happened before Christopher Columbus came. I knew no more about that than anybody else. I'm learning alongside my children. I always tell people I am 72 hours ahead of my fifth grader. And so that's about as far as my education goes right now. And it's okay. You don't have to know it all, I think is important. You're just a guide. The Holy Spirit is the supreme educator. So you don't have to know it all. You just have to be humble and have a willing heart. You step forth and put in the effort that you can, learning from other moms around you. We're all sharing from other fathers, from teachers, grandparents. We're all sharing here. We're all learning together. And, you pray about it. And you just ask him to fill the gaps that will be there.
Yes.
And he'll do that for us. So I just think that's my biggest, piece of advice is, don't let fear of what you don't know or your own ignorance keep you from opening this door for your children.
Absolutely awesome. We are so thankful for you sharing your insights and your perspective today, Amber. I really hope this was helpful and encouraging for everyone who is joining. Listen, if you would like to check out Amber's blog, you can find her at heritagemom.com or at Heritage Mom blog on social media. If you're interested in finding out more about Charlotte Mason's approach to homeschooling, HSLDA has a video resource available that we will post in the comments for everyone. I don't want this to end.
I
This was
know, this was great.
this
I
was
just
such
loved
a
it.
Oh, I am so happy, and thank you so much, Amber, for just being, willing to come and share your heart. I just pray God's greatest, richest blessings on you and your family, and I pray He would bring provision for the wisdom that He's given you as you're willing to share it with others.
Amen.
So,
Thank you so much. Thank
on
you.
that on that note, we're going to say our goodbyes.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thanks everyone for showing up. It was a blessing.